Dr. Qasim Zaki Ahmed from Egypt, and Professor Dr. Dilnawaz Garzezi joining very soon, and a galaxy of students. My co-supervisor Dr. Trudy from United Kingdom is also with us, and from Pakistan and abroad, lot of the people from the other countries, they are also joining us. And by the permission of the Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Muhammad Tufail Tamga Imtiaz, I am going to start today webinar, sir.
Please go ahead.
Thank you, sir. First of all, recitation of Holy Quran. Inna Allah malaikata yusalluna ala nabi ya ayyuhallazina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Indeed, Allah confers blessing upon the Prophet and his angels. Ask him to do so. O you who have believed, ask Allah to confer blessings upon him and to ask Allah to grant him peace. Durood Pak, Durood Ibrahimi, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammadin kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. O Allah, bestow your favor on Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, on his family of Muhammad, as you have bestowed your favor on Ibrahim and on the family of Ibrahim. You are praiseworthy, most glorious. O Allah, bless Muhammad and the family of Muhammad as you have blessed Ibrahim and the family of Ibrahim. You are praiseworthy, most glorious. Now, as already our honorable speaker, Dr. Kadam Siddiq, just asked me yesterday night that he is much busy and he has to leave for another some meeting. So without any delay, I am requesting Worthy Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Muhammad Tufail Tamga Imtiaz, to deliver his inaugural address. Professor Dr. Muhammad Tufail Tamga Imtiaz.
Bismillah Rahman. Thank you, Dr. Nurka. Bismillah Rahman Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Assalatu wassalam ala Rasulihil Kareem. First of all, I welcome all honorable keynote speakers and guests, all the people who are attending this webinar, international webinar. I believe this is a good chance for we people to share the knowledge, and the topic is, is very interesting: biodiversity and domestication of the plants. That, as you know, that now this pandemic is, of course, it has changed the world, but along with that, there is a kind of opportunity for we people as well. It was not possible for us to conduct such kind of international webinars, especially people who are sitting very in the far-flung areas like us. This Ghazi University is situated. I just want to brief a little bit about the Ghazi University. This Ghazi University is situated in southern area of the Punjab province. Is far-flung area from the capital, provincial capital. So this is the nascent university, just 7 years old. And I want to let you know also that I had chance to serve abroad more than 20 years, almost 16, 17 years in Kobe University, Japan, after getting my PhD in postdoctorate. And then I had chance to serve in King Saud University, Saudi Arabia, for 6 years. Then I came back here. I got this chance to establish this university as a founder vice chancellor. So within 2 years, we raised the enrollment from 5,000 to almost 10,000, over 10,000. And now we have 4 faculties. One is Faculty Agriculture, Faculty of Science, Faculty of Arts, Faculty of Business and Social Sciences. And also we are making very strong efforts, as you know, to establish a university, because when I came, my thought was to establish a university of some kind of international standards. But you know, it's very challenging task, and because we started from scratches, and we need help from you people as well to share the knowledge, so that how we can improve our capacities, how we can improve ourselves, how we can make better institution. So now we are at a stage, we have 4 faculties, and we got approved 10 more institutes and graduate schools, and we are trying to establish the university both structurally as well as institutionally. And now we are expanding the university as well. So almost 3 billion project, they are ongoing now at this moment. So we hope for the best that we will be able to establish this university as soon as possible. Although this is a very challenging task or not so easy a job. So thank you very much. I welcome you people again for this webinar. I believe that this biodiversity loss is as big as crisis as climate change. So I professionally, I'm biotechnologist. I can imagine that how biodiversity is important. I can see on the back of Professor Qasim Zaki pyramids. I had chance to visit these pyramids also. So thank you for showing this. Thank you very much, everybody. So I believe that biodiversity and domestication, how much that is important. And we have a great honor to see the internationally renowned scientists and scholars, and we would love to listen you all, and we want to get the benefits, faculty and all our students, they would get the benefit today, definitely, from today's seminar on the biodiversity and domestication. I think I should not take much time, because while experts there and professional and breeders and experts, they are sitting there. So I would love to listen their talk about the biodiversity and domestication. Thank you very much, honorable guest speakers, and all participants, students. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Worthy Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Muhammad Tufail Tamga Imtiaz, Ghazi University, Dera Ghazi Khan. And now I shall request Professor Dr. Kadam Bootsdi. He is Hackett Professor of Agriculture, Chair and Director of Institute of Agriculture, University of Western Australia, and he is lot of cap on his head. I can't explain here. Definitely and shortly, he was the United Nations Ambassador for Pulses, having a more than 25,000 citation, and it's my pleasure. He has accepted our request to be a part of Ghazi University platform in this webinar, and he has spared some of.
Thank you. Thank you, Vice Chancellor, Professor Tufail. Thank you, Dr. Ijaz Nuka, for the kind invitation and inviting me among the distinguished speakers which you have assembled. First of all, I would like to congratulate you, being a young university with a great ambition to become a globally renowned university. I think the way forward is to collaboration. We can learn each other, so I think this is very good. But can you see?
Not yet, sir.
Share. Any luck?
Try again.
Sir, your secretary made a very successful mock exercise.
I know.
Yeah.
I was away in presentation mode. So I've opened up the PowerPoint. Then
sir, at the top, sir, sorry for interruption. At the top, there is an arrow. Just click this one, and in this way you may be able to upload your presentation.
Yes, I do. I did click hide share, the share content, PowerPoint live, see your notes like that. Pretty presentation August. Browse my computer. Look, I'll just to do it. Presentation 2021, and then practice.
Sir, my IT person may help you. I am asking my IT person.
I'm almost getting there. I'm almost getting there. I'm almost getting there. Now I opened. Share. Can you see now?
Not yet, sir.
Not yet.
Yes, yes, sir.
Now, sir, it's.
Yes, okay. I start again.
Now.
It's uploading. Yes.
Now I need to get onto the PowerPoint mode. Can you see?
Yes, sir. We are seeing, sir. Please carry on, sir.
Okay, so sorry for that. So thank you very much. Without much introduction, I think the first point I want to say is that whatever we do with biodiversity, it must enhance the food system for food security and nutritional security. I'm sure that Pat will come and talk about the other aspects of it. So my outline of my talk is the global hunger and malnutrition, the prevalence of unhealthy diets, both undernutrition and overnutrition, challenges facing security and nutrition, food security. From
Yes,
here.
so I've got the state of Western Australia, second largest state in the world.
Sir, I can change, sir.
Okay, so state of Western Australia is the second largest state in the world. And the first largest state in the world is a country in Russia called Shaka. And we have 2.6 million people, so it's very thinly populated. The highest graduate wages in Australia. And Perth is a very affordable city with a number of multinational companies. Next one, please. I can't. Can I change?
Yes,
Is
sir.
it changed? Can you see?
Sir, I am changing, sir.
So is it? But I have to change as well. This is the third slide. This is crazy. Very sad. Why this is not good? Is it? What is the slide now? You can see which slide?
Yes, sir. Now, sir, its third slide is here.
Is it the canvas? Can you see? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are seeing the campus slide, sir.
Canvas slide. So I will go back to the canvas slide now. This is very difficult. So I'm talking on the slide, canvas slide. Someone has to change. I have to change here. This is going to be difficult. So the slide, the campus shows this is our university. It is situated on the Swan River coastal plain, and it's a beautiful campus. It's a comprehensive university. I'm now changing the next slide. Can you see the next slide? Hello?
Yes, sir. This is slide number 4. Campus slide we are seeing here.
No, campus is finished now. I'm moving into the next slide.
Yes, Perth and University of Western Australia perfectly positioned.
Okay, so I am changing so you can see it, correct?
Okay, sir.
Yeah. So it is a perfectly positioned because of the time zone. So we live in a place where 60% of the world population has the same time zone. For example, Perth and China, Beijing, same time zone. Singapore, Jakarta, only 3-hour difference with Pakistan. So this makes us very easy to collaborate, and it has a Mediterranean climate. Can you see the next slide?
Yes, sir.
So this is the UWA's global reputation. It's an internationally recognized university, ranked top in 100. I will show you that. Well-established industry partnership, whether it is in agriculture, engineering, or medicine, we do want to translate our research to the practical solutions. We are among the Group 8 universities. There are 40 universities in Australia, and Group 8 is the best research-intensive universities. In other words, 70% of Australia's research is done among Group 8 universities. Can you see this slide?
Yes, sir.
Professor Barry Marshall, the Nobel
Yes,
Prize in
sir.
2005 in
Yes.
medicine for the
Yes, sir.
Helicobacter
Yes.
pylori, and
Yes,
that
sir.
is stomach ulcer. He's a professor of clinical microbiology. He's still working with us and a great friend of mine. We have traveled together many countries over the years. Now I'm showing the next slide, UWA's international ranking. So you can see that we follow the metrics academic ranking of world universities. In 2020, we were ranked 85 in the world. For a small university, less than 20,000 students, it is an incredible achievement. In life and agricultural science, they have changed life science and separated agriculture from 2017. We are now ranked 17 in the world and number 1 in Australia for a small team of group working within the Institute of Agriculture. So this is an incredible achievement. Now, I'm just going to go and talk about my topic today, hunger, malnutrition, what is the global concern? So can you see this slide? This is the food security and nutrition in the world, FAO report 2020. Ejaz, can you see?
Yes, sir. Sir, we are seeing. Please carry on.
Very good. Now I will not ask. So this report is very important to look at, and if you haven't read it, I recommend thoroughly to read it. And the essence of that is there are 600 million people in the world still hungry in 2019, and that's rising, which is sad, slowly, and it will exceed 840 million by 2030 if we do nothing. And of course, we just heard about the coronavirus pandemic, 130 to 150 million undernourished during this period, underscoring the immense challenge of achieving the Sustainable Development Goal to zero hunger. And of that, Asia Pacific region has got a big problem, 381 million malnutrition. And that face biggest challenges, including Pakistan and India and other countries, 93 million stunted children under 5 years. Not only Asia, but also Sub-Saharan Africa has got immense problem, 237 million facing chronic malnutrition and 59 million stunted. I'm moving into the next slide. So the hungry people in the region has tripled from 1990-92 to 2017-2020, mostly due to wars and civil strife, not just lack of food. For example, Yemen, the proportion of undernourished people increased by 14% during the same period. And the number of stunted children is high. Places like Iraq, Sudan, Syria, and I'll show some data for Pakistan and so on. I'm moving to the next slide. So the percentage of wasting and stunting in children, for example, country next to you in India, it is 38%, but in Pakistan, it is 40%. And for the wasting in India is about 28 to 30%, and in Pakistan is not far off 32%. So we have a problem. And if you look at the globally, about 22% of the children under 5 are stunted, and 7 sub-regions out of 17 have high or very high stunting prevalence. You can see the countries in the subcontinent and mostly in the sub-Saharan region. I'm moving the next slide. So what is the problem? So today the global food supply rely increasingly on just a few crops. So for example, wheat, rice, maize, and potato. And we have done extremely well during the Green Revolution. The focus of the government, the breeding, the agronomy, the policy, all have been shifted towards that. Although in more recent ones, we are seeing increase in soybean, palm oil consumption, meat and dairy products in various countries, including fish. Next slide. So what is the unhealthy situation for the current food consumption? On the left-hand side, high consumption of harmful food, processed meat, red meat, salt and sodium, beverages, sweeteners, and so on. On the right-hand side, low consumption of what we call smart food or protective food, fruits, vegetables, beans, nuts, and they are commonly called underutilized or neglected crops. So the unhealthy diet is malnutrition risk of chronic non-communicable disease such as heart disease, motor neuron degenerative disease, obesity, and of course diabetics and stunted children. Next one, see the staple food in Asia and Africa. From Bangladesh to Laos to Cambodia, Vietnam, Indonesia, Sierra Leone, Philippines, rice is an important food. There's not much protein in rice. It is fully starched, and 2-3 times they consume, and look at the per capita consumption. So very little diversity in food consumption. Next slide. So the major global challenges to enhance food security and nutrition. One is we have huge environmental degradation happening. Natural resources, water, land, and biodiversity is an important resource. More food with less resources, you're not going to get more land. Coping with the serious climate change and implication, including in Pakistan. Lack of economic and social development, particularly least developed countries. And on the top of that, we have high birth rates in many countries in the region. And of course, the man-made disasters like political unrest, wars, civil conflict we are all exacerbating the increased poverty, hunger, and malnutrition. So how can we bridge? There are two things we have to bridge. One is bridging the production gap. The food production need to be increased by 70 or 50 to 70% by 2050. Limited yield potential of traditional major food crops, because we haven't really, the genetic improvement has been slowed down. The most we can say is that rice, maize, and wheat, it is slightly more than 1%. In fact, less than 1% in many cases. So genetic gain is slowing down. Nutritional gap, I mentioned earlier, production of staple crops like rice and wheat is not enough to accelerate the reduction in malnutrition due to insufficient supply of nutrient-rich foods. And the diversification of the food system, diversification of the agricultural system, cropping system is essential to diversify food system for healthy diets. Can you see my slide? So what is a food system? The food system consists of all elements: environment, people, input, process, infrastructures, and institution. So, and the activities that relate to the production, processing, distribution, marketing, preparation, consumption of the whole food system. What are the outcomes? Nutrition, health status, socio-economic growth, equity, and environmental sustainability. So this is the definition of a good food system. Now, if you look at this slide, we have production, post-harvest handling, distribution, marketing, consumption, but we need a policy on the left-hand side. If the government policy is actually biased towards something, then we are not going to achieve that. Regional cooperation is very important, and institutional and human capacity development, like your university, it has got the ambitious target of training the best researchers and agronomists and breeders in your country. The current food system relies on a few staple crops, as I mentioned earlier, so making farming more vulnerable to environmental shocks, including the climate change, the market shock, and the negative consequences for ecosystem and food diversity and health. So the limited diversity in the food system, including consumption, leading to unbalanced diets and ultimately malnutrition. So I'm pitching that it is essential to diversify the food system for a balanced diet and enhanced adaptation to climate change. Hope you can see my slides again. Ijaz? Hello?
Yes, sir, we are seeing, sir.
Yes, sir. Excellent. So important food commodities for the diversification of the food system for healthy diets. So I have listed from fruits, vegetables to whole grains, polysaturated fatty acids, seafood, and both commonly used and traditional underutilized local crops. I'm just giving an example. You can see this foxtail millet and poso panicum millets, drumstick, moringa, elephant foot yam, and then colocasia, for example, very much tolerant to transient water logging. So these traditional food crops and vegetables have rich in macro and micronutrients, for example, iron, magnesium, zinc, selenium, and calcium. They are also rich in vitamins, carotenoids, B complexes, C, K, and others, and of course, the era of antioxidants and fibers. So the UN FAO General Assembly declared 2021 as the International Year of Fruits and Vegetables, which is a timely declaration. The traditional neglected and underutilized crops, there are a number of them, including in your country. Many traditional crops also are well adapted to the marginal soil, harsh environments, and resilient to climate change. They play an important role in the cultural tradition, heritage, subsistence agriculture, economy of poor people throughout the developing world. But our policy shifted towards the major crops, so some of these neglected crops vanished from the farming system, the cropping system. But despite their great nutritional and adaptation benefit, traditional underutilized local food attracted little research and development attention. I'll come back to that later. So what are the multidimensional benefits of traditional underutilized crop? So in the center, you got the benefit, but the food and nutritional security, they are adapted to climate, resilience to climate change, adapted to harsh environment, low input agriculture, including organic agriculture. And in this process, we are going to conserve the biodiversity, culture, and the heritage of a particular region, locality. And should improve the livelihood of rural development and ultimately leading to economic and social development. I'll give some examples later. So the global interest in the traditional underutilized crops started in 20th century as a result of gradual change of attitude towards the importance of biodiversity. I'm sure Pat and other speakers will talk about it. Plant genetic resources by many countries, and that's by Convention of the Biodiversity, Brazil, 1992, FAO, 4th International Technical Conference on Plant Genetic Resources in Germany in 1996. I'll just give an example of quinoa, Chenopodium. It is a neglected crop. It was a neglected crop, traditionally grown by the indigenous community of the Andean mountains from 3,000 to 4,000 years ago, only known to those people of the Andean culture. It was grown as a subsistence crop, but the grain contains high protein, about 16%, compared to cereals, 7 to 9%. There are 9 essential amino acids, making it a complete protein supplement, gluten and cholesterol free, with a almost always grown organically in some of those countries. And vitamin B complex, vitamin E, essential fatty acids. And of course, it also got copper, iron, calcium, potassium, magnesium, manganese, and fiber. A perfect food for vegetarians and vegans, and that number is increasing rapidly globally. Currently, Peru, as you all know, the largest producer and exporter, about 52,000 tons, followed by Bolivia. These countries are also exporting more than 50% of their produce. However, increased in international demand then started production now expanding. USA, Europe, and more recently in Australia is a large producer as well. So the International Year of Quinoa in 2013, declared by FAO, has done a wonderful job. And you can see the amazing health benefit, how the mainstream community in developed and developing countries started utilizing quinoa in their diet. Now I will go very quickly to the pulses as an example, which your country, you value pulses very much, and it's a poor man's meat. And if you look at the globally, chickpeas, dry peas, the pisum sativum, dry beans, lentils, and number of crops. High in protein, low in fat, amino acid profile with the cereals, high in lysine, then of course many micronutrients, including quite a lot of vitamin C. Good quality carbohydrates, means not easily digestible, so it is good for people with diabetics and so on. And high in dietary fiber. From an agronomic point of view, they fix nitrogen. I don't need to dwell on that, 70 to 210 kilogram per hectare nitrogen. And globally, we are benefiting about 20 to 22 million tons of nitrogen per year back. So you can replace the bag of fertilizer, which is also leading to climate change through nitrous oxide emission. Improved water use efficiency, and the residue of pulses are also got low carbon nitrogen ratio. The pulse production global, if you look at on the left-hand side, 1961, 63, you can see what was dominating. The faba bean and the field pea were dominating. Lentil was only 3%, chickpea was 26%. See the shift within 2009-11, big shift, 36% in chickpea, faba bean shrunk, and lentil is increased, and pea is maintaining. Huge amount of research, development, promotion, particularly the international institutions such as ICADA, ICRISAT, IITA, and number of other national and international organizations has done a tremendous job in that. I was lucky to be named as the ambassador for the International Year of the Pulses. Again, we done some important work through that process, and that also helped to promote pulses both in terms of research and development. Christine Foyer and my team put this paper in Nature Plants. The main thing I want to emphasize here is that the global investment in pulse research, development, and extension is too low compared with cereals. Only 175 million per annum in 13 crops, whereas in the 3 crops, rice, wheat, and maize, probably several $1 billion. Now I'm going to the conclusion part of things. Ijaz, can you hear me still? And you are with me, all of you?
Yes, yes, sir.
Very good. So the approach for transformation of the food system for healthy diet. So we need the food system, the production, processing, including labeling and packaging, because the consumers are very keen, distribution and marketing and consumption. Examples of intervention for healthy diet: diversified nutrition, labeling regulations, advertising regulations, and food-based dietary and healthy diet, and leading to reduction of diet-related non-communicable disease. If you take any country, including your country, Pakistan, or my country, Australia, we spend a lot of money on public health. Major problem is we're trying to cure the problem, but if we start addressing the problem at the childhood, at the pregnancy, the lactation time onwards, we can reduce those health bills in the country. Some examples here without going through the Future Smart Food school lunch program, midday meal program. This is called Akshay Patra in India, in Bangalore. So what they do is that recipes based on a combination of pulses, millets, a small piece of fruits, spices, and that is really helping. The breakfast program, we could include that. All those means the farmers will have someone to buy the product, government procuring, and also your large army and soldiers who need the nutritious food. So I think it can be done provided there is a policy from the government. Then the growers, the small farmers will grow them. There is a market, ready market available. Again, I won't go through this, the holistic approach from 1 to 6, genetic diversity, selection, cultivation, harvesting, value addition, marketing, and finally impact. The number of pathways there. Again, I won't go through the details. And a lot of this is summarized in one of the very nice book we edited, Xuan Li from FAO and myself, and that's available. And if anyone is interested, please contact me. I can send the link. It's quite a good example of Future Smart Food, how we can use that in particularly in Asia. Also, we done one on mountain agriculture, Mahmoud Sol, Xuan Li, and myself. Again, mountain region, and you have quite a bit in Pakistan where some of these crops can be grown, including things like buckwheat, etc. So the mountain agriculture needs attention, and that could be a vehicle by which we could transform some of these diets and so on. All these are summarized in a recent perspective article we just published in Nature Plants, and that's also available online. Now, conclusion, the current food system needs to be transformed. There is no doubt about it. Diversify, incorporating more commonly used fruits, vegetables, grains, and they are underutilized to achieve the health, diet, and overcome the malnutrition and contribute to the food security. And healthy diet will certainly provide more protein, macro and micronutrients, and vitamin to reduce and eliminate the SDG goal of the hidden hunger elimination, stunted and wasted children, and of course in some countries the obesity of overeating certain food. So what is targeted traditional underutilized crops deserve special attention to diversify the food system, and that needs attention from the government and the policy makers, because they are adapted to harsh environments, marginal land, low input agriculture, and also many of them has got a high resilience adaptation to climate change we are experiencing. I think we need to enhance the awareness of the policy makers on the importance of this diversified farming system, diversified food system, for the reasons I mentioned. We must incorporate the diversification of the food system in national food security and nutritional strategies. Every country has got that strategy. We must encourage and invest in scientific research, at least a certain proportion of the resources, public and private sectors, to improve these crops, neglected, underutilized crops. And we must also increase the awareness of the producers, saying that if you produce that, you have better chance to adapt to climate change, you have got a better market, and then consumers, the importance of the nutritional health, as we did with quinoa and also chia and number of other crops. Ultimately, an environmental benefits of a diversified cropping system will benefit the whole country. What we need is a coordination, a capacity development, including your university, stakeholders, food system components, processing, marketing, and consumption, not just by growing alone. And developing innovative platforms to allow greater access to information, such as today, and technology transfer to all stakeholders involved in the food system and value chain. Thank you. And lastly, if you look at the SDG, the contribution of diversified food system will contribute to 1, 2, 6, 12, 17, 5, 13, and 17, all aspects of the SDG goals by simply diversifying our food system, conservation of agricultural biodiversity, and that will lead to equity. Women will be very much empowered having local production of some of these crops, climate change adaptation, and national capacity development. Thank you.
Much, Professor Dr. Kadam Booth Siddiq from University of Western Australia. Sir, we are very thankful to you. Yes. For sparing your precious time for University, Ghazi University, Dera Ghazi Khan. And sir, we are much excited to hear your kind presentations full of knowledge. And as you have to leave for another meeting, so there is little bit change in program. I can take 2 or 3 questions from the audience, and then we shall proceed further.
I can stay till 6 o'clock, and again apologies for the stuff up with the presentation. So I'm happy to stay for up to 6 o'clock, not a problem. 6 p.m. my time, that's another 20 minutes.
Okay, so sir, I can take the question for you at the moment, then we shall go for the other speaker.
Yeah, please.
Please raise your hand from the audience. And luckily, sir, we have a much learned audience with us from so many countries, and some professors and their students as well. Please raise your hand, and then we shall proceed further.
There's one.
Yes. Yes, please. Jarna Ashraf, please introduce yourself, from which country you are asking the question, and please unmute yourself and ask the question quickly. Yes, Ashraf, please unmute yourself if you are hearing me. Next question is Dr. Tasneem Ahmed. He is the former Director General Plant Protection from Karachi. Please, Dr. Tasneem Ahmed, please unmute yourself and ask the question from Dr. Kadam Booth Siddiq, the honorable keynote speaker of today international webinar. Dr. Tasneem Ahmed, please unmute. Unmute yourself.
The other way is that, well, not necessarily now, if there are people have questions, then they send the questions to the coordinator and then you can read that. That may be the best way to do it.
Okay.
Otherwise it will be difficult. They just send by writing and then you read whatever relevant ones quickly and yeah.
Yes, sir. We cannot unmute. वो नहीं कर सकते. You have to unmute.
उन्हें कहें कि आप raise hand करें फिर हम आपको rights दें.
वो जिन्होंने unmute किया है.
Kindly raise your hand, then we will give you rights to unmute.
इनको तो unmute करें ना. Yes, Dr. Tasneem, please unmute yourself and ask the question.
Someone says we can't. They may not allow to ask a question. So the way is to write. I think they may not have access to unmute. So the muting is controlled by you.
Please unmute them. Now, please.
One by one.
Dr. Tasneem.
So
Now we have unmuted all participants. Please ask the question, Dr. Tasneem.
Oh,
Only the person who have raised the hand, he has a right to ask the question, please. Okay. Write the question and we shall ask our honorable keynote speaker to respond by yes.
Okay, I write here.
Okay, now we are hearing you. Please ask.
Okay. Dr. Saab, I'm Tasneem Ahmed from Karachi. I listened this presentation, a wonderful presentation, and it is giving us guidance in same situation as we are facing in Pakistan. As all of us know that food produced in world level is sufficient enough for feeding all the population existing at this time. And the problem is distribution. And the same situation we are facing in Pakistan, we are producing a lot of food which is enough for our population at this time. But the problem we are facing is distribution or some other problem. How can we handle this? With your kind experience, kindly guide us. Thank you.
thank you. I think I understood the question. I fully agree with you that there's a lot of ways in which you can achieve food security. One is avoiding the wastage. There's a lot of wastage. And the food distribution, again, the policy level, one has to work on it. My address was largely about malnutrition. So even when there is food available, we are seeing stunting and wasting in children. So your observation is right. We need a better policy and also affordability of that food. Thank you.
Yes. Sir, one question more from Sindh province. Huma Baloch. Yes, please. Huma, please ask the question from honorable speaker. Sir, she is asking.
Yes.
She is asking from Sindh, Pakistan, Sindh province, Pakistan. She said, my question is there any specific plant which give us more benefit to grow in our area?
Yeah. So, of course, I'm not very familiar with the region, but if you go and look at what we have done in that book, in the FAO book, which I'm sure if you send the details to me, I'll send you. What we have asked each country region is you identify what are the 10 or 12 most important so-called underutilized crops which used to be traditionally grown. It could be millet, it could be sorghum, it could be barley, it could be buckwheat, depending upon where you are. Then we need to classify what are their nutritional qualities. Are they adapted to your region? Why they are neglected? So I think certainly it's worth FAO to have a dialogue with your country, and we are happy to work and identify locally what was grown last 20 years, 30 years, or even 50 years ago. Then we assemble a list, and then from there we can come up with a short list. So I'm not asking to bring a new crop from Australia or United Kingdom. Look at locally. There are amaranth, for example, leafy vegetables. There are certain legumes. There are certain cereals. There are certain, for example, drumstick. I'm not sure whether it is consumed in Pakistan. Drumstick is a wonderful plant, and it has got the leaf, flowers, and the pods. The yams, many kind of yams. So sweet potato, for example, a lot of carotenoids and so on. So start from the scratch, look at what has been traditionally grown, talk to people, look at the literature, and then assemble a group of germplasm, and then evaluate that locally, and then work. And I'm sure people like Dr. Ijaz and others will be able to guide you on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. I oftenly use the word during my lecture. These are the orphan crops where we have to put our attention. Thank you very much, sir. Now I shall request the next keynote speaker. Before inviting the next speaker, I welcome Vardi Vice Chancellor from University of Kotli Azad Jammu Kashmir, Professor Dr. Dilnawaz Gardezi. He has joined us. So many other dignitaries, they have also joined. It's very hard for me to name each and every person. So welcome to all people who is joining with us. Now I shall request Professor Dr. Pat Heslop Harrison. He is Professor of Plant Cell Biology, Molecular Cytogenetics at the University of Leicester, United Kingdom, and he is Principal Investigator, Plant Genome Evolution Group, South China Botanical Garden, Chinese Academy of Sciences, China. And along with this, it's my best luck, and I am very lucky. I have to, he is my postdoc supervisor, and I have to live with him for 1 year. And what I am nowadays, definitely credit goes to my supervisor, my mentor, Professor Dr. Pat Heslop Harrison. Sir, please.
Good afternoon, everybody. Are you hearing me and seeing my slide?
Yes, sir. Sir, we are hearing you, seeing you.
Excellent.
Yes, sir.
Well, it is my very great honor to take part in today's celebration for the International Day of Biological Diversity of the United Nations, and to emphasize the point of the slogan that we are part of the solution. It's a particular privilege to follow after Dr. Kadambot's talk. And I think a lot of the points that I will make will be complementing very much what he was saying. But also, of course, it was terrific to hear what Vice Chancellor Tufail had to say at the beginning. And partnerships and training are absolutely part of the solution to the crisis that we face in biological diversity today. And this is something that we can all be working towards. And it really is so important that this is a global endeavor and part of both the United Nations and the Biodiversity Day, but also the Sustainable Development Goals. And in a way, almost the most important of those, as Professor Kadambot indicated, is the last one, SDG 17, a partnership for development. And we really are in a global partnership here. All the slides I'm going to show here are downloadable from a tiny URL address, biodiv.domest. I put, and everybody's free to download those. So this is a fantastic image, now very, very old, but 50 years old, but it really does illustrate what our planet looks like in one of the early images taken from space. And we're fortunate in being custodians of the biodiversity in our planet, with 350,000 or so angiosperms, which is a very small number compared to the number of insects and algae that we have. And yet it is mostly angiosperms, whether directly as food or as feed, which goes to animals, which is responsible for our well-being. But as Professor Kadambot emphasized, there are only about 30 major crops which constitute almost the vast majority of all of the food which we eat. But there's quite a bit more diversity which we're able to use, which are in these so-called orphan or minor crops which are grown. And there are about 7,000 that are edible. But of course, one of the threats to diversity is not farming. Many people say farming is a source of biodiversity, but actually is a threat. Many people say farming is a threat to biodiversity, but actually wild collection, whether that is of plants or of fish particularly, it's very important that we maintain, that we have farmed products which are farmed sustainably, and that is a key thing which we need to advance. The whole world is impacted by people, and it is also managed by people. And this nice picture here shows what the distribution of different land uses are throughout the whole of the world, but it's superimposed in order to give a human scale to it, rather than just saying, oh, 7% of the world's is cropland. It actually shows that is a large part of Southeast Asia equivalent in area. But a substantially greater area of that is either producing feed like maize for livestock, about 7% of about 5% of the total, or the huge area of grasslands and pasture lands worldwide. Notably, the area, the built-up area, is relatively small infrastructure, including roads and so forth, only about 1%. And then there's the barren land, which includes deserts and mountaintops and so forth, at about 19%, so about half of the total of the livestock and cropland. But it's important to note that everything is now managed by people. Our impact as people is absolutely global, and every part of our planet is impacted by what we are doing, whether that is through fossil fuel use, through water usage, and so forth. So over the next 20 minutes or so, I'm going to be talking about the global challenges we're facing, what is there in the biosphere, and then I'm going to give a very positive message, really in parallel with both of those that we've had from Vice Chancellor Tufel and Professor Kadambot, that we are able to meet these challenges. But there are threats to biodiversity at the different levels of genes, of species, and of ecosystems. There's an impact of people, and building infrastructure is very evident, but actually is rather a small part of the total, 1% of the world area. And equally, the people on the coasts, coastal development, where most people of the world live, is a substantial but still not major thing. And food production, of course, agriculture occupying a third of the surface of the land surface of the world is absolutely having a big effect. And the aim is not to not produce food, but to produce more food as is needed by the people to improve standard of living and health, produce more food without trashing the planet, without destroying what we've got there. And that includes what we're doing to climate and water, not just through eroding and removing biodiversity. And on this theme, I would say that bad management is a major threat, but we're only now learning what bad management is. And that's something we are all studying, how to manage sustainability and improve the sustainability of what we're doing, how to gain the solutions to our food production. So good management is a win for everybody. And during the last talk, I did add here Vice Chancellor Tufail's introduction to today's webinar. And that's why it's so important that we have university trained, tertiary education trained people in order to help develop and show what good management is for our biodiversity and our food production. Now, one of the things is people talk a lot about saying that small changes have a disproportionate effect, or do they, even asking the question, do they have a disproportionate effect on biodiversity? And I think I would make the point here that the reason that we can live is that life can only occur at the verge of stability. That the enzymes in our body that take the potatoes or the wheats and rice that we're eating and convert those into energy, the enzymes only work because the activation energy is relatively low, and that's because there's 20% oxygen in the atmosphere. If we went down to 18 or 15% oxygen, the enzymes would no longer be able to overcome this activation energy, and life as we know it would no longer exist. But equally, the opposite side, if oxygen went up to 31%, up to 21%, with the current biome, it's been there before in the long geological history, but if it went up now in the current biome, then forest fires would become devastating. So it's only because we are at the edge of stability that we're able to live. And therefore we've got to manage things on this very steep curve between destruction at both sides of where we are. And bad management can very easily lead to huge environmental problems. So here, for example, is a picture from Africa, where you can see that the overgrazing has removed all of the vegetation, and therefore the land is eroding back towards the river over to the left-hand side. And every time there's a rainstorm, the water washes away there. And yet you can see how just a small amount of the bushes that have been left by the goats here, each one of those has a splendid area of biodiversity. So this is just bad management. This is something that teaching people and learning about how to stop the erosion is very important to stop the reduction of biodiversity, and in this case, land going out of production. This is a similar paper making that point, which we co-wrote with our organizer, Professor Ijaz, who was a fantastic person to have joining our lab for a few years ago. You can see the sort of thing that we were considering there, that we need to address as plant breeders with respect to water. Efficient use is promoted by plant cover. And in this case, on the right, you can see what terracing does to improve the water retention. Other aspects of management, I've talked water, but wind and erosion is another problem. There was a rather complementary picture to this that Professor Kadambot showed with his sheep and the erosion, the wind erosion that was happening here. Here's a cyclone blowing away all of that nutrient-rich topsoil in this case, in this area, because of overgrazing, poor management of that land, not because of lack of water, not because of lack of nutrition, but bad management that's destroyed the biodiversity, the plants that are growing on that site. Now, just in case you think that this is something which is only in developing parts of the world or only a recent problem, not a bit of it. This is in Europe, in the west of Ireland, not so far from where my birthplace was. And this shows the effect of 1,500 years of overgrazing. There would have been 2 or 3 meters of peat and a forest on top of this, a very productive ecosystem. And overgrazing over 1,000 years has eroded this back to the bedrock. And interestingly, now this is regarded as a very sensitive and preserved landscape, but even so, it's not what was there. So it's something we're learning about. We're learning about what the effects of management are. So that's one thing that people have done, which has been particularly devastating to biodiversity and the plants and dependent animals. But another thing is the invasive species, bringing in species from one part of the world into another. And here we can see a picture actually in Kerala in India, where water hyacinth, the plant from South America, has become dominant on the surface of the water and is causing the water to become deoxygenated and putrid and occupying a niche that's none of the local plant, none of the native plants is there. And this is the sort of thing that can go wrong when plants are moved from one area to another. And the general consensus is that more than the visible urbanization, infrastructure, and even population pressures, invasive alien species are one of the big damages to our native biodiversity, to wild species that are under threat, because these spread into sensitive, different environments around the world. And here we can see another example, a Mexican species, and this is a very, very vicious plant thistle called Gemini mexicana. If you walk past this, I had the wounds from this prickling me on my legs for about two or 3 years after I'd been in the field taking these photographs. It's goat proof, but it's taking out all of the local species. Now, what I'm not saying, though, is that agriculture is certainly part of the solution, and it is certainly necessary that we produce enough food for what we are doing, and that often means having good, highly productive crops which aren't competing with different species. This is sustainable intensification, having intensive production in certain areas, but not extending that production outside into wild areas which aren't so productive for crops that we want to eat, but are sources of all of the wild genetic diversity which make our planet what we want, and also provide us with the resources of water purification, of air purification, and so forth, which I will be talking about a little bit more. And certainly there's no question that farmers and also ants, there's a lovely paper a couple of years ago from here showing about how ants are really the other species, or the other group of species which are farming. And farmers have been getting better at their weed control. So within field biodiversity isn't, I think, an aim of conservation. Just having more weeds and not production means that we have to cultivate more, and often 1.5 times more land. So sustainable intensification and not invading crops into sensitive areas is certainly part of the importance of conservation. Now, this comes into policy making, And again, this complements what Professor Karambot was just saying. And here am I sitting next to one of the former members of the, or three of them, sitting next to a group of members and former members of the European Parliament here, working on a bill called Technological Solutions for Sustainable Agriculture, and giving that some of the evidence that was used to write that. But it's certainly part of what we should be doing as tertiary education institutes, in showing what is needed as part of the answers to sustainable production and not destroying our planet while we're trying to produce our food. And here a couple is my acknowledgement of my submission to the British policy documents, but of course these are there are global equivalents for these, many of them within the framework of the United Nations. Here is part of the acknowledgement of my submission to environmental and land management policy discussion last year, and here is the non-native invasive species strategy that is now the legal framework for not not introducing alien species within Europe, or within Britain in this case. But these are important things which we as scientists really must make a contribution to. So moving on then to the next section, what are ecosystems and how do we get our foods from them? Well, we can think of them as a circle of life, as we have going round in the left-hand side, self-organizing, they're self-maintained and they're cycling, and generally have a defined scope there. And in the agricultural context, we need to feed the people without destroying the planet, and that means taking things out of the ecosystem. So we have the inputs to that ecosystem. We have the light, we have the heat, we have the water, we have the oxygen for respiration and the carbon dioxide, which provides a carbon source for plants, and of course the nutrients. And from those, our aim is to extract outputs in the way of crops and of fixed energy, which is what we eat, without collapsing this cycle here, without destroying what's going on here, and without expanding it into other ecological areas. So we're therefore pulling out the food and the feed, and of course fuel in terms of biofuels, fibers in terms of the clothes that we're wearing, whether those are cotton or animal fibers, and then the important things of pharmaceuticals, ornamental crops, and the other F's that I put here that we want to pull out. And of course, we've been getting better at doing that in weed-free crops, like we see in proso millet, the panicum, which again Professor Karambot mentioned. And here we are, what we brought into these solving these solutions of getting these outputs from the crops. So 10,000 years of domestication. Can we can we domesticate and use more species? Well, it's interesting that I think there are rather few opportunities to introduce many new species, much beyond the 200 or 300 which we're currently using, because evidence is that these species have spread widely, many of them globally, whether that's maize, wheat, rice, and there's been little change in these since the early stages of agriculture, and sometimes they've been repeatedly domesticated. But nevertheless, wider use of these current species, particularly with what we can do to change their genetics to make them suitable for sustainable intensification of our agriculture, is going to be very critical to what we're doing in the future. And as I mentioned right at the beginning, there are a few species where wild collection must be replaced sustainably by farming those species and by domestication of them. And there are also new uses of the healthy crops and the food supplement type crops, which we need for a balanced diet, and also the big new opportunities of biofuels replacing the use of biomass as a major energy source. So are there many candidates? Well, there are just these 200, which Professor Kadambot said about the essential need to bring these major new crops back into production. And interestingly, when we look at their genomes and their chromosomes, we find there's huge differences in which the properties of those, despite perhaps saying that the amount of DNA matters or which part of the crop is eaten. Actually, we eat different parts of different crops, and this is part of the diversity which we must use in agriculture. But so we want diversity in wild species, in areas that aren't productive, but we also want to use diversity within productive agriculture of crops which we're eating. And there aren't many rules for successful domestication, but we know that we want to keep the diversity high. Now, another interesting thing, I talked back to the 10,000 years which we've had of agriculture, but look what's happened with plant breeding just in the last 50 years. The area that we've actually been cultivating, whether crop or wild or pasture, hasn't actually increased very much. There's not much more land. And actually, as I've been saying, we would like to actually reduce the pressures on land. But while the human population has more than doubled in that time, the production of major crops has increased for even more than that, partially because of agronomy, things like precision planting and, of course, fertilizers, but also because of the genetics which has happened. And much of the improvement has been genetics in the last 30 years or so. And here you can see the G of genotype, E of environment, showing that really in this period here, genotype was far more important. The genetics of the crops are incredibly more important than improved agronomy, even although that is both are part of it. And one of the things we can look at is diversity of genes. This is one example, one of the most valuable expensive agricultural product that's cultivated on a significant area, 250,000 times more than wheat or maize per gram. But huge amounts of genetic diversity in this different species of the wild species related to the saffron. And this is the sort of differences that we see in the genetics. We have a hypervariable region here, big difference from one line, one accession to another, but then we have between species insertions in the DNA, and we have single nucleotide polymorphisms down here in other parts. So this is a sort of diversity at genetic level. Here we have diversity that we now see within species. Different bananas, and actually there are two different species in these different lines, including the hybrids between two musa species, Acuminata and Balbisiana. And these are some of the ways that we both need to conserve these and utilize them to improve how we're doing the crops. In the background here, we have a fan of different cereals, all of which are part of a common gene pool where we can bring these together as hybrids, and we can transfer genes between many of these different species. And I put a couple of examples where we've been involved in doing that. Here, this crop on the right-hand side has been devastated. It's fallen over because the base of the stems have rotted here. And then there's been a rainstorm shortly before harvest. You can see the combine harvester starting here, and it's destroyed this very hard, almost complete crop loss. And yet here's a plant which has introgression of a wild genes from Aegilops ventricosa, from a wild Aegilops species into wheat. This one on the right-hand side of the two stems will fall over. The one on the left, same conditions, strong base of the stem. So this is where genetics can really come in. This is another example of genetics giving mosaic virus resistance. Just like humans, there are not really any drugs which cure viruses. So we can't use an agrochemical, but there is genetic resistance. And here in these lines that are called the N lines here, these have introgression of wild lines, wild chromosomes into the wheat, giving the resistance to the viruses. So we need to feed more people without destroying plants and the planet in the future, and domestication through use of the genetics that we have, through designing and thinking about what genes are there, what's present in the world's biodiversity, allow us to address these questions. So super domestication goes beyond domestication to thinking about how we can improve crops, both genetically and to some extent agronomically as well. And my conclusion is that the gene pool does have the diversity to address these challenges, but we need new methods to exploit and characterize the germplasm to let us make sustainable use of that beyond the crossing of two varieties, but through manipulating genomes, making crosses, fusing cells together to make new hybrids, back crossing that I gave the two examples of chromosome manipulation in the wheats there, generating recombinants and making new recombinants, which were both in those cases. And then, of course, there are the very important parts of transgenic approaches of moving genes between species and gene editing as well. So we need to get from yield, quality, sustainability, from the inputs, from the agronomy, the genetics, and the technology. These can meet the challenges that we have from climate change, the challenges that we have from feeding populations, and we need to get better at what we do. This is all part of the partnership that we have with farmers, traders, processors, and of course the end users. And this is important that we communicate and collaborate with respect to all that. And those not only give us the outputs in terms of the fixed energy and the crops, but in terms of better heat transfer, reduced, better stable heats, not going up and down each night, freezing in the night as it is in the desert. Plants stop that. Water, purifying the water, reducing the rate of runoff, all comes from sustainable, good management of good genetics in the crops that we're extracting. And then, of course, carbon fixation in terms of carbon dioxide being fixed by the plants, nutrients, preserving what we have in nutrients. And these all fit together as making us part of the solution for world biodiversity today and for meeting many of the different requirements of the global goals for sustainable development of the United Nations: zero hunger, good health, well-being, clean water, sanitation, affordable energy, sustainable communities, life on climate action, life on land, and most important one that I emphasized at the beginning, partnership for the goal to reduce the world's people that are in poverty. Action number one, no poverty, produce health and safety food, safe food, and that comes from biodiversity, and we can conserve and feed the planet using that with training and management from the gene level to the species to the ecosystems. Thank you very much.
And thank you, sir. What a fantastic presentation we have seen here. And definitely in today's webinar, I think this is a unique webinar where teacher of the teacher, Professor Pat is presenting his students, and then again, this mind students, they are listening very carefully, plant breeders particularly. Thank you very much, sir. I can take questions at the end of webinar. I think Dr. Pat will stay with us.
Yes, yep,
he
I'd
has
be
also
very
a
happy
very
to
busy
talk at
schedule.
the
Yes,
end.
sir.
I'm afraid I took a little bit too long there and went for 32 minutes.
Okay, okay, sir. Now I request Professor Dr. Syed Dilnawaz Ahmed Gardezi. He is the Vice Chancellor, University of Kotli Azad Jammu Kashmir. Is also holding a charge of Mirpur University of Science and Technology. In this way, he is the Vice Chancellor of two universities of Azad Jammu Kashmir. We are very lucky. He has spared some of his precious time for us to be a part of Ghazi University platform. Sir, welcome, and please now I invite you to start your presentation, sir.
Sir, I also welcome you. Assalamu alaikum, sir. Dr. welcome. It's really great honor for us. It's great pleasure for we people. It's honor for Ghazi University that you are presenting here, being a breeder and eminent scientist. So we love to listen your talk. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much.
Sir, Professor Dr. Syed Dilnawaz Gardezi, Worthy Vice Chancellor, University of Kotli Azad Jammu and Kashmir, sir.
You have to
Sir.
unmute me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, now we are hearing you, sir.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. First of all, let me pay thanks to the organizers, especially Professor Dr. Tufail Saab, Vice Chancellor University, Ghazi University, for organizing this very important seminar on the eve of the Biodiversity Day. I am also grateful to Dr. Ijaz Rasool Nurka Saab. He is a dynamic person, of course, where he was serving at the University of Sargodha. He used to organize big conferences and seminars over there as well. I think he's much active in Ghazi University as well, and I appreciate the selection of Professor Tufail Saab for such a dynamic person. He will be very much useful for your university, I think. I am very much lucky to hear Professor Harslop Harrison from UK. Similarly, Cardinal Ford Siddiqui Saab from Australia, and Zaki Ahmed from Egypt, and many others from Pakistan, of course. It's my pleasure to be with you this afternoon, of course. So let me start my presentation. For the last about 13 or more years, I am more involved in the administration rather than in the research. Some of my students are doing some work. Let me introduce my area. Basically, I don't know whether you are able to see my presentation.
Not yet, sir. Please upload, sir.
How to upload it? I don't have any experience about it.
Sir, at the top, along with the way we have to leave, there is an arrow upward. Just click this one and select your presentation, sir. Sir, it's adjacent to your mic option, whereas there is the arrow upward.
Okay, okay, yes, I am opening it, but
Yes, sir.
Control Shift and
My IT person, sir, he will guide you, sir.
okay, please.
So you must click the arrow button or press Control Shift E. Sir, are you able to share?
No, not yet.
Sir, when you will click that arrow button, there will be option of PowerPoint Live. You would just click on that and
Okay.
देखो मैंने दोनों करना पड़ा आगे
नहीं sir.
Sir, if it is not possible, kindly WhatsApp me. We can share from our side.
Okay, let me try.
Okay. Sorry.
Sir, your Outlook is open now. Open slides.
We are live at the Facebook of the Gazi University page as well. We shall also share the recording. And meanwhile, for the Vice Chancellor, yes, sir. Now it's.
Is it coming?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
It's
okay,
clear now. Please
okay.
carry on, sir.
So, let me share with you that this Azad Jammu and Kashmir, of course, is a mountainous region, and there the land holdings are very small, and mostly the agriculture we used to have integrated type of the agriculture, having crops, vegetables, and animals as well. So, are you hearing?
Yes, sir. We are hearing. Yes. Please carry on.
Okay. Yes. So, regarding this today's topic, the plants, of course, are the primary source of survival. There is unique biodiversity in this area, Azad Jammu and Kashmir. We are having crop plants, we are having fruits and vegetables, we are having some medicinal plants, forest and timber plants, ornamentals and other plantains. These are the very rich in biodiversity, of course. So what are the challenges we face? These are the small land holdings, population increase, malnutrition and poverty, low productivity, pests and diseases, and of course climate change is the biggest threat now, and loss of biodiversity is one of the challenges as well. What are the opportunities to mitigate these challenges? Of course, we are having the technologies, biotechnology and recombinant DNA is there, gene editing is there with us, marker assisted breeding, that is also working very well. What we have done, in different plants, domesticated plants, in this area, in my group and in the laboratory of my departments, we characterized local plants, their genetic diversity. We had identified certain important genes to address the malnutrition problem. And we also worked on the disease resistance, especially in the wheat, and then characterization and multiplication of some potential ornamentals and olives and other important crops. Then identification of suitable environment and characterization of improvement of sugarcane, then legumes and vegetable breeding. These are the areas we worked upon. So we isolated some very important genes from local plants which we intend to move into the staple food crops to meet the malnutrition problem, because everybody over here, they cannot afford the balanced diet. So what we were intended that if we can have some gene sources and we can move those gene sequences into the staple food crop, then we can have the balance and diet by eating only the staple foods like wheat, rice, and maize. This is one of the very potential plant, which is prevalent in this area. That is the sea buckthorn. It's very hardy plants. It is very much it can thrive in diverse environments from 10 degrees centigrade to even minus 10 to 42 degrees centigrade temperature, and it's naturally growing in the mountainous regions, and its fruits are very much rich in iron, in vitamin C and vitamin E and many other nutritious components. So we worked on this plant. These are the plants having the fruits of the sea buckthorn. This is again the same picture of the same plant. There is another plant of the same family that is called as the autumn olive. It is another important plant. These plants are, of course, nitrogen fixer as well in this area. So they have dual advantages. One, at one hand, they can fix the nitrogen. Secondly, they are very hardy. Thirdly, they provide very nutritious material, to balance the diet. This is another shape of the food. These are the harvested fruit of the autumn olive. What we did, we isolated some ascorbate oxidase genes from these plants. Their diversity is quite immense. There are so many ecotypes existing in different areas. They were characterized by using the molecular techniques. And then we isolated certain genes over here, HPPK, DHPS genes, that was isolated from these are the iron genes, of course, from the sea buckthorns. And then this was the diversity analysis, among these plants. And the other genes, that was lycopene genes was isolated from this plant, identified, and that was cloned, and that is ready maybe to be transplanted into the staple food crops. This is the larger diversity in these genotypes over here. Then we worked on the gene postulation assessment of the level of resistance to rust diseases in spring wheat. So one of my PhD students, he worked on that. Similarly, the rust, of course, there are three types of the rusts which are coming into the wheat crops. They are breaking the resistance very quickly, and we have to go with these strains and work for the resistance. Of course, slow rusting genes are available. They were characterized using the molecular techniques, and we have identified some genotypes as well. These were the markers we used in rust resistance in the wheat. And of course, these were the primers used to identify the genes available in different varieties of the wheat. And then another student of mine, he worked over the incorporation and identification of genome regions associated with slow rusting genes in wheat by DNA-based profiling. So this was also done in the wheat crop, and we have a very good variety, resistant variety at the moment as well. That is in the testing stage, last stage of the the registration. So this was the diversity found over there. Then we worked on the olives, the introduced varieties. There are certain varieties of the olive which are present in Pakistan, established now. They were worked by one of my students, and we tested the diversity of those plants and their potential to produce the fruits under the environmental condition. These are the different varieties, producing the fruits. And we profile them through the DNA for the primers used. And then these varieties were multiplied on mass scale using the tissue culture techniques. And now we are able to produce a lot of the plants to give to the farmers on commercial scale. These were the medicinal plants which were characterized. These are all local medicinal plants, and some new medicinal components, they were identified biochemically through different techniques, and they are also under work, for the medicines. Then we started a sugarcane breeding program over here. We identified certain areas, very particular areas, which are producing the fuzz, the flowering of the wheat crop is, being observed over there, and they are being utilized to produce the wheat, this sugarcane. And then we worked on the evaluation and breeding of some important flowering flowers. These are the cut flowers used in the market. These are good for enhancing the income of the farmers in small land holdings, and many people are now cultivating these flowers, and they are earning a lot of the money by using these flowers. And another project which we have started over here is about the common beans, and these common beans were used to be very common before some time, but with the passage of the time, people left the cultivation of these, and now I think a lot of these common beans are being imported from different countries to Pakistan, but we still have a lot of the potential. And yesterday we were having a seminar, and our team has gone to the farmers to educate those people to review their agricultural practices and practice the cultivation of these beans once again to balance the diet of the people. And some other, vegetable crops are under investigation, including the onion and garlic, of course. So what we can bring forward is new high-yielding, low input-oriented varieties is the need of the time, of course, which can give better yield in low fertility, limited irrigation, which must have nutritionally some balanced components in it, having inbuilt diversified resistance against diseases and pests and tolerance to salinity and high temperature. So let me conclude my talk. There are challenges of climate change, of course. The opportunities are also available to mitigate the climate change impact on domesticated plants. The conservation, exploration, and efficient utilization of plant diversity have greater scope to minimize the challenges of food security. Continuous and concerted efforts globally coordinated are required with available technologies to safeguard the food security challenges. So I think by listening to the important scientists from UK and Australia, this may be very small, presentation, but I just wanted to show that what we are doing in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. So this was the area, these were the areas where we are working, and my students are working now, of course. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, sir. I request Vardi Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Muhammad Tufail sir, kindly respond to Vardi Vice Chancellor, Azad Jammu Kashmir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. It was so wonderful. and I'm very happy to see your research on this biotechnology, how you are improving the crops, especially in Azad Jammu and Kashmir. And I think this is good opportunity. I mean, we should, it's kind of less more a talk when in this seminar. That's in online or webinars, they are a kind of opportunity. We can share knowledge. We can share our all ideas. This is actually toward better agriculture and better knowledge. I think this is a great opportunity, and I really appreciate your very good talk. I think there are some need to be unmuted. So
Thank you, Dr. Sir, for your comments. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
We are ready to collaborate anytime, anywhere, inshallah.
Sure, sir. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, sir. It's a great news for me, sir. In your area, sugarcane fuzz is being produced, and we are totally, Pakistan is relying on Combator and Sao Paulo and some other areas for fuzz. And definitely it will be my students' pleasure to visit the site where the sugarcane fuzz is being produced. And although the presentation was, sir, it was a short, but it was a full of human need, starting from the pulses, sugarcane, kitchen items, everything has been included in your areas of expertise. Definitely. The same words, once we were, Dr. Pat is with us, we were in a serial meeting where the one person asked Dr. Pat, what you are doing in your lab? Dr. Pat said, we have a UNO in our lab. Lot of the people from different countries, they are included in Dr. Pat lab. Dr. Pat, do you remember this one?
Absolutely, yes. But Professor Ghazi's talk, I thought Professor Khan's talk and Ghazi was fantastic. Sorry, Professor Ghazi's talk was fantastic there because he brought in both the importance of the major crops and the minor crops, and looking at potential new crops, and also, of course, the medicinal uses are very important.
Thank you very much, sir. I can take the questions later on because one of our honorable speaker is on queue. I am really thankful. Professor Dr. Qasim Zaki Ahmed, he is the professor of genetics, Faculty of Agriculture, Minya University, Al Minya, Egypt. He is the member of Egyptian National Committee of Genetics. He is the former president of African Crop Science Society. When I was visiting the South Africa, at that time, he was the president, and he is now a member of the Arab Science Journalist Association. And we are lucky enough, Dr. Qasim Zaki, along with his students and some of his colleagues, is with us, although he was not feeling well after COVID vaccine. But this is his kind dedication to the genetics, and with Ghazi University, that he has spared his precious time for us. We really appreciate Dr. Qasim Zaki Ahmed, sir. Now, please share your presentation.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ijaz Rasool. I'm very happy to be one of this very important meeting in Biodiversity Day. I would like to thank Professor Mahmoud Tufail. I am the Chancellor of Ghazi University, and I will be very happy to incorporate with this meeting. Thank you very much, Ijaz, for kind and about my health. Already I get the first dose of vaccine, Sinopharm, yesterday before, and still I am live and good, I think. I hope all the nation worldwide escape from this coronavirus. I would like to speak very quickly in time because the end of the meeting is very closed. But I would like to speak about biodiversity and domestications. And we have to remember our grandfather, who was the first domestication of plants and animals. In Egypt, we know that the ancient Egyptian was the first nation in human history discovered agriculture arts. I will show you some photos. As you see, this is around 5,000 years ago, about agriculture in Egypt. And the Fallah, this is farmer, Egyptian farmer working in agriculture, proved the humankind. This is kind of tools. This is kind of tools to agriculture. This is back to more than 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. For example, this is kind of tools to prepare land for agriculture, as you see in these photos, and also using tools to collect water.
Concluding remarks.
Because in Egypt we are depend on irrigation. Around 99% of water in Egypt depend on irrigation. We have very little rain. Therefore, as you see now some photos, this is plates in agriculture museums in Cairo, the second worldwide agriculture museum, described how this people domesticated some kind of a plant. As you see here, fishing and grape collecting. Also, I can show you some, this is photos in temples and tombs and Egyptian monuments show us how these people, for example, this photo on upper describe how the ancient Egyptian fishing fish and harvesting wheat. Also, if you are lucky and visit agriculture museum in Cairo, you will see these samples of fruits and some kind of a plant, because Egyptians have been adapted. For example, we found the seeds of watermelon around 6,000 years ago in some kind of symmetry. Also, not only watermelon, but medicinal and ornamental plants, as we see in this picture. Therefore, this day, this is Biodiversity Day, it is the good time to explain who started this domestication. In this slide, we show now cereal crops. For example, in left side down of picture, this is barley plant around 6,000 years ago, still in agriculture museum in Cairo. And also the silo, how you can keep this product for several months, and started civilization in Egypt 5,000 years ago. Here also you can see with harvesting and collecting grapes, this photo around 3,000 years ago. And the second one, the all process to harvesting wheat and store wheat. But unfortunately, this was past, and Egypt was a main supply of Roman empires for 1,000 years. But 200 years ago, the situation is completely different. For example, we have serious problem in wheat. The production of Egypt is not enough. For example, you can see this is very raw, big raw to share some kind of bread. For example, in Egypt now, the situation is we produce around 50%, which our consumption in bread. Therefore, Egypt is the #1 largest wheat importer for wheat to supply the 100 million people in Egypt. Therefore, we are going to use new crops to supply or to make enough foods. Last 20, 30 years ago, we started to introduce some so-called future crops. For example, this is kind of jojoba, quinoa, stevia, ودورة, to complete the needs of consumption of people in Egypt. But today I will speak about one crops, this quinoa, which have been shown by the first speaker, Dr. Siddiq from Western Australia. But to introduce new crops to agriculture, this is not easy. For example, this plant is not familiar in Egypt, quinoa, but if we can use it to complete the amount of wheat we need. For example, we growing around 1 million hectare in Egypt. This is not enough for Egyptian people. Therefore, we need to increase the area of wheat, but unfortunately, we haven't enough land. We are leaving and growing a plant only 5% of our area, 5% only. And we have limited water, unfortunately. We depend on River Nile around 97% for irrigation. Therefore, now we are facing a new problem with a new dam in Ethiopia. However, we are looking for just a plant. For example, quinoa is nutrient plant and not need a lot of water. For example, this plant is easy to cooking. It's easy, gluten free. This is meaning we can add it, the flour of quinoa to wheat to complete this consumption in Egypt. Quinoa is a sober food. This is rich with protein, fiber, antioxidant, vitamins, high in protein. Also, protein of quinoa contain all essential amino acids, as we see. If we see here, the protein in quinoa is rich more than wheat, which we are using, and also carbohydrate, fiber, vitamins, mineral. It's very rich. But unfortunately, this plant not familiar in Egypt. We know this plant just 10 years or 13 years ago. As we see in this map, the source of quinoa is west, north of South America, and started now many countries growing in quinoa in their area. As in Egypt, as we see here, this is seeds. This plant around 2 meters in tall. This is flowering, and respect to biodiversity. This plant, when we are growing in Egypt, many different colors. Therefore, this is flowers, but unfortunately, this is very small and very difficult to make breeding for quinoa by using hybridization. As we see, this is seeds around 2 meter diameter, very small, but sometimes also some kind of cultivar or variety. This seeds covered with saponin, and this is not favorable in feed. Although now quinoa can you found in many supermarkets worldwide. Peru, Bolivia, Ecuador, the most important producer worldwide, but now 70 countries in the world have been growing. Respect to genetics, is this a plant, annual plant, dicotyledon plant, 36 chromosomes. I said this very small flower. Therefore, hybridization it's difficult. 10% cross pollination. I said this is a small flower, but some kind of development in genetics and breeding this plant. Here is this our experiment. I will briefly explain. We use the 10 genotypes. We import these genotypes and we make 2 years seasons in Al-Mini University, 240 kilometers south of Cairo. This is a university around 50 years old, and our faculty around 70 years because we started before our university. This our experiment, and we made many studies, agronomical studies, seed color, because this is important, and also DNA molecular marker. We found wide diversity, and we make ANOVA analysis. For example, for agronomical studies, we made many traits, but now I can show only plant yield and number of pencil per plant, 1,000 seeds weight, as you see in this table. I will not go through the details of this table, but we found a wide range of biodiversity in morphological and agronomical. For example, in colors, we found among 10 genotypes we tested white color, from white to yellow to black. For example, we found 3 cultivars or 3 excision genotypes. It's very suitable for foods because very strong relationship between colors and the content. Also, we made some molecular marker to distinguish which genotype is suitable for our farming in Egypt. However, we found more than 138 bands. Among them, 64 were polymorphic bands. I will not go in details through, however. We found most important and more suitable genotypes, so-called Egyptian. This is accession and now going to adapt in Egypt. This genotypes may be more suitable for farming and agriculture in Egypt. Even the color of Egyptian accession, it may be suitable for using in food, but also we need more studied in agronomical and time of cultivation, also and so on. Therefore, I would like to finish my talk because I see the time is over. I would like to thank everyone and participant of this kind meeting, also local organizing committee of the webinar. Thank you very much.
Shukran Jaziran, Professor Dr. Qasim Zaki Ahmed. Thank you very much for your nice presentation. Our worthy Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Muhammad Tufail Imtiaz, he have much experience in Arabic region in Saudi Arabia. I shall request worthy Vice Chancellor to pay thanks to Dr. Qasim Zaki Ahmed and some comments on his kind presentation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Urka. Dr. Zaki Ahmed, first of all, I congratulate you on your nice presentation. It was so nice because you have given all the previous history as well. What germ pool, those people, they were using 5,000 years back. So I think this region is a very rich in in resources as well as in the history. So I love this place. I already visited these pyramids in 2014. I visited Egypt for one conference, and visited many other places. So I believe this is a good sharing of the knowledge. We learned a lot from you people and Professor Harisan, Dr. Siddiq, and Professor Dilnawaz Gadezi. Thank you very much, all of you. I think let us keep continuous somewhere in future as well. So if you people could get the chance to visit Pakistan or to collaborate with we people with Ghazi University, we always welcome, because we have also much resources and we are just just initiating, making strong efforts. Recently Ghazi University has appointed 8 professors. There was no any single professor, or even there was no associate professor in the university. So recently we recruited 8 professors and Dr. Nurka is one of them. So, and we also recruited 40 associate professors. Now overall we have almost 300 faculty, 100 regular and 200 plus we have visiting faculty. So we are fighting, we are making our strong efforts. So we want to learn. One of my colleague in Saudi Arabia, while I was in King Saud University, he was always saying that we are not the best. We don't claim to be the best, but we want to be the best. So we try our best. So knowledge sharing, I think, is the basic critical tool for these kind of webinars or seminars. These are very critical for the knowledge sharing, so we can learn from each other. This is so our students, they can learn, new faculty, fresh faculty, they can learn from the senior faculty or the scientist. So I really thank you all from the core of my heart for giving us the time and sharing your knowledge, sharing your research with us, and we are really thankful to you all. And I also congratulate the team, organizing committee, Dr. Nurka, his team, Department of Plant Breeding and Genetics. So now Ghazi University, after hiring all this new faculty, so we have a sort of competition among the departments and among the professors. So we are almost usually we are conducting such kind of seminars and webinars. So thank you very much once again. Yes, Dr. Nurka.
Thank you very much, sir, for your kind words of wisdom. Now this is the time for the Q&A. That is the much important part of any webinar, because our product, our students, our collaborator, they have the opportunity in Q&A. I am really apologize. Some person requested me at the moment to present their presentation, but it is not possible for me to add at this moment, because time was scheduled and our worthy speakers, they are the global leader in plant sciences, and they have a much precious time. I am really thankful for their kind patience, particularly Dr. Pat, Dr. Qasim Zaki, the Vice Chancellor of the Azad Jammu Kashmir, and unluckily Dr. Kadam Siddiq have to leave for another meeting, otherwise he will stay with us. Anyhow, now this is the Q&A session. I request all the audience, kindly raise your hand. It is not possible for me to mute all at the moment, then it will not be possible to hear anyone. So raise your hand, and one by one I can take the question. Yes, Huma Baloch. Yes, I think she is from Sindh province. Yes.
Assalamu sir. I think so. It's a very informative webinar for us. We are also a student of MPhil, and I am from Shalatish University. My question is that sir was told about genetic resistance to kill the viruses from the genetic resistance. Sir hello.
Yes.
He told.
Yes.
Yes. So how we can get these resistant plants, or how we can because in our university it's a small university, we can't do the genetic researches on it. So how we can get these plants?
So in this case, the hybrids were made. Well, it was known that the Thinaparan line didn't suffer from the wheat streak mosaic virus, and I know that's a big problem. I'm just having a dialogue with somebody in Iran actually who is reporting that that wheat streak mosaic virus is a problem in Iran. They detected that the Thinaparan bessarabicum, Thinaparan ponticum species, was resistant to the wheat streak mosaic virus, and then made the crosses between the wheat and the Thinaparan line, and then back crossed that. And then we were doing the cytogenetics with it, and we also detected that there was another helper with introgression from another species, from rye, from Sikali, which gave the best resistance. So initially, some of the work is based on the field trials, which isn't the expertise of my lab, but is important for the collaboration with the labs which are working with the wild species. We make some of the crosses, but in this case, another lab had made those crosses, and then we were characterizing the sizes of the recombinants that were carrying the resistances. So 2 points. First of all, there's a lot of work there that requires the chromosome engineering, which is hybrids, identifying the resistant sources and making the hybrids, back crossing those and testing them. And secondly, there is the opportunity, of course, for collaborations with many labs, my own, but others as well, that would want to work with you on more molecular characterization.
Thank you so much, sir. So much for giving me the answers. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Our worthy audience, Mr. Hassan Zaki, I am seeing you are continuously attending this webinar. Sir, now your mic is unmuted. You have some comments or any question? Mr. Hassan Zaki. Okay, next, Mr. Kamran Abbas. Mr. Kamran Abbas.
This is Kamran Abbas from Ukazi University, sir.
Okay.
I want to ask a question, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, India is offering to Indian farmers to check their lands with machines, with tractor, within 800 rupees.
Okay.
All process in 800 rupees. Can it possible in Pakistan?
I have visited India, Ludhiana University of Agriculture, Punjab University of Agriculture, Ludhiana, and Amritsar and the adjacent area. And there was also a myth at that time that there is some imports that are much cheaper in India, but it's higher prices in Pakistan. And I think there is some currency differences, and because some inputs, they have international market rates. It is not possible for any government to do so much subsidized. Anyhow, I don't know from where you got this information. Anyhow, this is, I think this is not a International Biodiversity Day related question. So I go for another question.
My sorry, sir, my sorry.
Okay, no problem, please. Hatem Zaki, please.
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the organizers for this such an amazing webinar. Actually, I have two questions. One question for Professor Bat, and the other question for Professor Qasim Zaki. So I would love to start with Professor Bat, please.
Yes.
Professor Bat, thank you for your presentation. It was really cool. I just have a question here regarding the statement which you mentioned in your presentation. You just mentioned that farming is a threat for biodiversity. As we all know that population is projected to reach around 9 billion within 20 years, and this required increasing in food production around 60%. So we actually need farming. So how we can balance between this, like farming process and agriculture production, and on the same time keeping the biodiversity, saving the biodiversity. Thank you.
Okay, so very definitely my word here is that it's the question of sustainable intensification, so that we need the best possible genetics of the crops and to grow them on existing land with the best use of water and the best use of the nutrients there, but sustainably, not using groundwater, not using the nutrients without replacing them. And in particular, the answer to the biodiversity question is not to increase the area which is ploughed. So definitely go more intensification within existing areas and make sure those are fully productive and not impacting the areas of biodiversity. And I think that we can, in that way, feed more people better and with greater sustainability than we are at the moment. Professor Kadambot mentioned as well the need for potentially reduction in animal proteins and more plant production, and of course that's one of the challenges which I know in Asia, and I've discussed this with people in India as well. There's an idea that the Western diet is something to be aspired to, and it isn't. The amount of meat that people eat in US and in Europe is unhealthy, and actually to have 2 or 3 days a week eating plant-based, more plant foods, more pulses particularly, is extremely important to reduce the pressure on land for production of animal foods, of animal proteins. But of course, there are still opportunities for more animal protein, for using animals as part of the diet and as part of agricultural sustainability. That one wouldn't want to remove animals from the vast areas of rangeland, which are incredibly important for ecosystem services, for slowing flow of water and so forth, and preventing them changing to forest and actually reducing the biodiversity that's there. So we need a balanced approach, lots of management, as I say, and global solutions to feeding the 9 billion people without destroying our planet.
Thank you very much, sir. Mr. Hatem Zaki, just tell me, you are from Egypt or any other place?
Oh, actually, Iwate University, Japan, and then USDA, USA, but originally I'm working as associate professor in Faculty of Agriculture University. But I'm now in a loan as associate professor in the University of Technology and Applied Sciences in Sultanate of Oman. So it's really long journey. Thank you, Dr. Bat, for the answer. Is really nice. So we just can rephrase the sentence to be farming in good agriculture practices will not threat the biodiversity. So that could be the conclusion for that. Thank you so much.
That would be my conclusion.
If you excuse me, I have one more question for Dr. Qasim, if you give me the time for that.
Sir, let me take the question from the other
Okay,
people.
thank you.
Then we shall
Sure.
come back. Dr. Shujaul Mulk from Quaid-e-Azam University, Islamabad. Dr. Shujaul Mulk.
Thank you, Ijaz Sahab. I don't have any question. I just have a comment on Professor Pratt lecture, especially. Dilnawaz Gardezi Sahab and Professor Pratt have delivered very useful and to the point lectures. So thank you so much, Professor Pratt, for sparing time for Pakistan and Biodiversity Day. This was just a comment. We spent a very good time with Professor Pratt. Thank you.
Yes, I remember. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Amna Asif, sorry. Amna Asif.
Good evening, sir.
Yes, please.
Thank you for giving me the chance to speak. Sir, there is a question that in Islamabad, Pakistan, we are facing the invasive flora, the Brosonacea and Parthenium species, Lantana Himara. How to deal with these invasive flora? Is there any solution for this? And Dr. Pat has suggested that the ant is the weed control, and kindly pay some more details on that. How
Okay,
ants
thank you.
control.
Okay, I request Dr. Pat, please.
Okay, so yes, I was actually just doing a BBC radio interview last week about one of the invasive plants in Britain, and they are very difficult. They're very difficult to manage and control. Millions of dollars are being spent on Nicornia water hyacinth that I showed. Millions of dollars are being spent on the Fallopia Japanese knotweed in Britain. So it really is a matter of making sure people know about them and having local and national programs to remove these species where they're known to be invasive and destroying biodiversity. It should be noted that there are very few invasive species, but having national strategies involving eradication or minimization are certainly very important. Sorry, I've forgotten your second question immediately.
From
Control in your presentation, it was stated that.
I'm getting rather a lot of microphone interference.
Good evening, sir. Thanks for the.
Yes.
Sir, I understand like farmers have to use farm machinery and practices to increase yield. Each time they are trying to increase yield to feed this increasing population, sir. But sir, at the same time, this machinery and repeated agriculture practices are eroding topsoil. So, sir, what can a small farmer do to protect his soil from erosion?
Ansa Akdas, you are from?
Sir, I'm from Ghazi University, Dera Ghazi Khan, Department of Plant Pathology.
Plant pathology. I request Dr. Professor Qasim Zaki kindly respond this question, please.
You can repeat again question, please.
Ji Ansa, please repeat the question.
Yes, sir. Sir, my question was, as a farmer has to use farm machinery and apply farm practices to increase his yield and save time. But sir, at the same time, this machinery and repeated agriculture practices are eroding the topsoil of his farm. So, sir, what can a small farmer do to save his soil from erosion, his land from erosion?
Yes, because our machines, it's very old, which I show in my presentation. But now we have a new machine for harvesting, for irrigation, and for growing a plant in Egypt. Now also we try to introduce new crops because our area is very limited, around 3.3 million hectare, and this is fixed. To increase our product in wheat, for example, it's very, very difficult. We have to introduce another crops like quinoa. Quinoa can growing in new reclaimed land like desert, not need a lot of water, and had tolerance for temperature, low fertility. Therefore, we are growing to teach farmer to use new crops like quinoa, stevia, jojoba, as so on and so on. And many farmers, it's very acceptable for this new crops to increase the productivity. And we can use this quinoa to add it for wheat flour to increase the amount of wheat in Egypt. But we're using a new technology for agriculture machines. Thank you for your question.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Now, this was the last question. Now this is the time of to conclude the session. Although as per schedule, it was my duty to conclude this session, but I think in the presence of Dr. Qasim Zaki and my supervisor, Professor Pat, it is not possible for me to conclude the session. So I request both of you people to conclude the session one by one. First, Professor Dr. Qasim Zaki, and then the final conclusion from Professor Pat.
Yes, I'm happy to be one of this group. Respect to my presentation, because today it's Biodiversity Day. I would like to thank our father, our grandfather, who make domestication of plants, especially for the ancient Egyptians. They made many domestication plants still till now we are using. But now it's not enough for our consumption in Egypt. Therefore, we need to introduce new crops in our agriculture, in our farming, so-called future crops. We started around 20 years ago to studying around 7 new crops not cultivated before in Egypt, like quinoa. I speak about this quinoa, but also already did some study on stevia and moringa until now. But to introduce new crops in your farming, this need many studies to make adaptation for these crops in our agriculture. We did many studies for quinoa, and we get some exception, or I can say some variety, maybe suitable for agriculture, and we have to distribute these seeds for farmer and follow up the agronomical study and adaptation, and so on and so on. Thank you very much, Dr. Ijaz.
Thank you, sir. It's my pleasure. You have spared time for us. Now for the final conclusion, for my students, which joined later on, Professor Pat is the world leading agriculture scientist, having more than 20,000 citations, and I am much privileged. I have many chapters as a joint publication with Professor Pat, and I already said what I am now a day. This is only due to the Professor Pat training, and in the presence of Professor Pat, it is not possible for me to conclude the session. So the final conclusion, sir, please conclude the session.
Thank you.
If you allow me, I would like
Professor Ijaz.
It's very important.
To follow up what Professor Qasim was saying as well, of course, we thank our ancestors, but we are also incredibly grateful to the farmers of the world today, both the smallholders and the larger commercial farmers, who provide us the food that we're eating and who are not making us work under the sun for 12 hours a day, producing the food, that actually we have the time and the ability to do this. And many of our ancestors, many of our great-great-grandfathers were farmers, if they weren't miners digging out coal. And we are very grateful to the farmers and the generations of breeders who've gone before in allowing us to have the standards of living. And of course, all these generations of farmers have been and still are the stewards of the biodiversity. While we need the regulatory framework, which I talked about with some of the laws, we are still actually responsible to farmers for delivering the answers in preserving the biodiversity that we all rely on to make our planet habitable. We're also very grateful to our universities and those of us involved, the people involved in tertiary education and facilitating that. Professor Tufail and Professor Gazier as Vice Chancellors who addressed us today. It is fantastic that they are seeing the importance of having education of the next generation to deliver us with a sustainable food based around biodiversity and based around not destroying our environment, but improving what we have in the environment and improving the life of people. So that brings me to thanking Professor Ijaz, congratulating him on two things. First of all, the terrific opportunities that his new appointment is bringing to advance the aspects that we're working about, and the vision, advancing the vision of the New Gazi University, and also thank him for bringing so many people together to be able to discuss the issues around the International Biodiversity Day on the 22nd of May. And let us all think about how we can contribute to the solution. The motto of the day is "We are part of the solution," but please, everybody go away and think how you can be part of that solution to the world's problems. And let's think in the broader terms. Let's all work together and collaborate on International Biodiversity Day. Thank you very much, Professor Ijaz. Thank you very much to the IT team that I know has been working well behind the keeping all of our connections going, and thank you to everybody who's taken part in this exciting and important day.
Thank you very much, sir.
I'd like to close the meeting.
Sir, with your kind permission, Dr. Trudy Schwasker, she has joined now, and she joined earlier, then later on I think there was some issues. So with your kind permission, can I take a comment from Dr. Trudy?
Yes.
Yeah, of course.
Yes, also thank everybody of taking part, and would like to emphasize again how much we enjoy having collaboration around the world, welcoming visitors to our lab. And we hope once the pandemic is gone, we can continue the collaboration and all contribute to teaching the next generation of students. Thank you everybody for listening.
And thank you very much, ma'am. Definitely after the pandemic, it will be our pleasure, my worthy Vice Chancellor, and once again me, to visit your lab in University of Leicester, to extend collaboration with the Ghazi University, and to send some students and faculty members from Ghazi University to visit your lab or a part of a lab in a postdoctoral or the PhD studies. Definitely, I think you have a very excellent job in your lab, and you have a very nice collaboration throughout the globe. And now, I thank all of my participants from different countries. It is impossible for me to count the countries from where the people were with us. Anyhow, this is the International Biodiversity Day, and we have to a home take message. What our honorable speakers, my worthy Vice Chancellor and the Vice Chancellor of the Azad Jammu Kashmir said, and I understand that the seed security is the first step towards the food security, and this is the trials we have never lost, because we are going to transfer safe globe to our next generation. In this world, on these words, I am going to close today webinar. Most of our speakers, they have the other assignments. I once again thankful to my faculty members. Please come on in backside to show Dr. Pat and Dr. Trudy and Qasim, my Department of Plant Breeding and Genetics. They are here in face-to-face. This is the hybrid type of the webinar. Dr. Shetati Mapara, she is the Associate Professor in Plant Breeding and Genetics. Then Dr. Ali Baksh, he is the Assistant Professor. And then my IT team, and Miss M.S. Noberg, she is in last phase of her PhD. And some of our faculty members, they are online. Due to the pandemic, we have a much care about the social distancing, and once again, we all are thankful to Dr. Professor Pat, Professor Qasim Zaki, Dr. Trudy Schwarzkar, Dr. Kadam Siddiq, Professor Dr. Dilnawaz Gardezi, and finally, the most propelling force behind us, the worthy Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Muhammad Tufail Tamga Imtiaz, who always supported us to lift University of Ghazi University across the board, to touch the global universities, to touch the international global scientists, so that our students, they can get the knowledge from out of classroom knowledge, particularly during the pandemic. Once again, thankful to all of my worthy speakers and worthy Vice Chancellor. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Trudy, once again.
Thank you, Ijaz.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Qasim. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Dr. Hassan Zaki, you are with us throughout the session. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.